welcome everyone. For this session, we're going to get inside of emerging funds that support and invest in Black and Brown founders. I'll be your moderator today. I'm Steph Thomas of Impact America Fund. We are a Black female-owned VC shop. We support tech founders that are growing scalable companies that are profitable, but also really care about the economics and the equity of communities of color. And so with that, we'll get into it. I'll first start with a round of introductions. Mac, you can feel free to kick us off, and then we'll go from there.
How did I know I was going to be first? What's going on, everybody? My name is McKeever Conwell. Most people call me Mac. I'm a software engineer by trade, two-time founder with one exit, one not so much. Worked for the investment arm of the state of Maryland, doing seed investments, then ended up leading an effort to create a pre-seed fund specifically for underrepresented founders. It is the first and only state-backed pre-seed fund for underrepresented founders in the country, something I'm very proud of. And last September, I left that job to start RareBreed Ventures, a pre-seed to seed venture fund, investing primarily in companies outside the major tech hubs. Happy to be here and be amongst a bunch of friends.
All right, Samara.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here with everyone here on the panel. My name is Samara Mejia Hernandez, and I'm a founding partner of Chingona Ventures. Chingona means badass woman, and I'm investing in badass founders at the earliest stages. My background is I was born in Mexico. I moved to this country at a young age, so I'm an immigrant here. Grew up in a dual language, multicultural, low-income household, so that's the lens I've always brought to my investing style. I'm an engineer by training. I started my career at Goldman Sachs, so I invested in the public markets. And after getting my business school degree, I went to the private side. So I joined a local fund here in Chicago for 2 funds and then saw a huge opportunity.
We might have lost Samara for a second, but we'll go ahead and let Austin do his intro, and we'll see if Samara can come back in.
Sure thing. Once I see Samara moving again, I'll defer the seat. So, hi everybody. My name is Austin Clements. I'm the managing partner at a firm called Slauson Company. We're an LA-based pre-seed and seed stage firm rooted in economic inclusion. What that means is that translates into 2 areas of investment right now. The first is tools and platforms that support small businesses, and then in small business owners. We want to democratize entrepreneurship. And then the second category is culturally relevant consumer tech. And I think Samara's back. I would love to give this badass her time to do that. Samara, are you there? Okay. Well, that's us in a nutshell. I've worked in venture for quite a few years at this point, but started this firm. We're pretty new and just getting off the ground now. I'll hand it back to Samara now.
Can you guys see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know which. I think where I left off was just I was in the public markets, and then I went to the private markets. I launched the fund, and we've made 23 investments, and now we're in fund 2. We're shortly launching fund 2, so excited to be here.
All right, Nazir, round us out with the intros.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're at. First of all, thank you, Derek Smith, for your leadership in bringing us all together. Nasir Qadri here. I am the founder and managing partner of a Washington, D.C. base. We coin ourselves as an inclusive investment vehicle, laser focused on partnering with exceptional, diverse management teams. We mean that holistically. That's rethinking the building blocks of wealth, from education to employment pathways to financial wellness that we believe turbocharges economic mobility across the country. So we're a sector-specific fund. All of us have strong backgrounds, domain operating investment experience across the future of work and the financial services sectors. And we do this through our inclusive investing strategy, a investment discipline that allows us to widen our lens and helps best position our companies to outperform. Much like Samara, I too started my career off in the public markets at Goldman Sachs. and transitioned. I was a civic appointee, and then got my introduction to the private markets after owning a coffee shop in New York City, which was a coffee shop that meets an incubator. And then, much like Austin, has spent the past about 6-7 years in the private markets across two funds. So excited to share our lessons learned, join my colleagues sharing our lessons learned, and as we have recently launched our respective funds, and excited to be part of this community in LA as well.
Very nice. All right, before we get into the discussion, I do want to say thank you as well to Pledge LA for sponsoring, supporting this particular panel session. And for our audience, feel free to light up the chat with comments, even questions. We'll try to reserve some time at the end to answer a few select questions from you. And with that, what I'll say first is it's truly an honor and a privilege to have this dialogue with you guys. I am truly a fan of all of you. We each have, personal relationship, but also professionally, I believe that, you are the representation of what VC should look like. And so as we dive in and we talk about, the markets and how you crafted each of your investment theses, I also want to talk about what the future looks like, right? And the type of future that we all are collectively working together to build. So with that, I want to start with Samara. You talk about Chingona meaning badass woman, and you clearly are. You are one of the few female Latina women VCs who've launched your own fund. You also connected to being in Chicago, being in the Midwest, and how what you've seen in terms of investing patterns, right, has not matched what you're seeing in terms of opportunity in society and in markets. And so can you talk a bit more about this point of how VC and the VC landscape needs to change, but also how that's influenced your own thesis as a venture capitalist?
Yeah, no, thank you. When I started in venture, it was 7 years ago, and it was at a different fund. And at the time, I kept seeing opportunities come through, and I kept seeing them being passed on over and over again. And I had enough data points over time where I was like, if we would have invested in this company at this point, they would have grown in revenue. They would have grown in users. They would have even had exits. And we keep passing on them over and over again. And I started to mentor, but that's not enough. And many times women and minorities are over-mentored and underinvested. And over time, I'm like, I have enough data points where I know that if I would have invested in this company, there would have been some sort of positive outcome. And so I actually, at the time, went to go launch just an angel group, because it was like, how do I, as a Midwest VC, launch a fund with zero high net worth individual network? And there was no rolling funds or anything like that at the time too, or I couldn't publicly advertise it either. So it was hard. So I went to go out to launch an angel group, and it turned into very quickly a venture fund, because I had an anchor LP who was ahead of its time in terms of seeding, first time fund managers. And so I was fortunate that happened. But I went with the thesis of, there's changing consumer demographics. They're changing tastes. The certain demographics even are some of the fastest growing in the United States, and no one is targeting them. And one example of that I always give of that is the Latino community. We're one of the fastest growing populations in the United States. 1 out of every 4 kids being born today is Latino. And the way we grew up is very different than the way it is now, right? Like we're not just the poor immigrant anymore. We're getting higher income, higher education, higher degrees. That's changing, and all of a sudden we have income that we are not investing. We don't trust banks. We use phones very, very differently. We use media very differently, and no one's been really able to crack that. And so for me, that's one example. I don't just focus on the Latino community, but there's multiple examples across different demographics, different cultures, where no one's targeting them. And I think it's crazy that they're not. But for me, I see it as an investable opportunity first and foremost. And that's the lens I bring to the companies I look at and invest in.
That's great. Yeah, and I love the what I pulled from that is sort of this intersection too of the Latino community, but also, women entrepreneurs. And you talk about over mentoring, but under investing. I think that's powerful for us to all take away. Now, Austin, I'm going to lean on you to talk a bit about your thesis, but in the context of LA, right? And part of your story is, working on the ground in community in LA, seeing a lot of the fragmentation in the ecosystem, but also seeing a lot of, what is needed for supporting small and medium-sized businesses. And so if you can speak a bit about your origin story in terms of what motivated you to launch Slauson & Co., but also how that is very relevant for the types of companies you want to back.
Sure. I mean, I grew up, born and raised in LA, in Gardena and then Ladera Heights to be exact. And, both areas predominantly African American. And I grew up around so many talented, brilliant, ambitious people that had zero exposure to this industry of venture capital. And to me, that is just a missed opportunity, or really for me, with my investor hat on, like Nasir and Samara, like my career started in investment management on the finance side in public markets. And so as an investor, I always think through the lens of like, where can I generate alpha? And what that basically translates to is into what am I seeing that others aren't seeing around me, where I could, if I could outperform by leaning into a particular opportunity or a particular perspective that I had that others don't, then I might be onto something. And so for me, that became very clear to me that if I got into venture capital in, what was this, maybe 2009, 2010, when I first became really interested in it, that if I could make my way into the industry, then execute against this thesis, that there was some opportunity to be had on betting on the people that I know. This is, for me, I don't think I said the word diversity in, probably the first 5 years of my professional career. It wasn't about diversity. It was about the people that I know. It was about, backing people that I'm familiar with, that I understand, that I grew up around, and things like that. So for me, I think that it did ultimately, as more people started to see and realize and recognize the statistics behind how many underrepresented founders there are that are doing amazing things that just aren't getting real looks from the industry, that created a few opportunities. One that I want to touch on is one that you mentioned, which is Pledge LA. Pledge LA was an initiative that was created between Annenberg Foundation and Mayor Garcetti's office to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion across the tech community in LA. I was very fortunate to be named founding chair of that organization, and I ran it for a couple of years. Now it's run by Kiana Patterson, who I'm pretty sure is in this audience here. What up, Kiana? Doing amazing things. It's been amazing to me, like when you talk about Los Angeles, to see a city that is built on diversity. You can't talk about Los Angeles without talking about like all the communities that are part of it. Really lean into taking a position of like, that is one of the pillars of why you should build here. I personally don't believe that there's a better place to build a consumer product, because you can test on a large population of so many different demographics and populations and perspectives and whatnot. So I think it's a great place to invest. We're a nationally focused fund, but at the same time, I think that LA provides a very unique opportunity that we could lean into. So all in all, again, it all comes down to like, where is there an investment opportunity? If you would have told me in 2009 that in 2021 we'd still be talking about how underrepresented African American Latinx founders are, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd be like, no, somebody's going to see how obvious this is and correct for it in 2 or 3 years. It still blows my mind that we could even have this panel. 21, but while it's here, people up here, we're all winning alongside each other, because there's so much room still to grow.
Absolutely. Making the tent bigger, right?
Exactly.
And I'm going to just double click on what you said about your approach being, investing in things that you understand, and how that ties to your own roots inherently, and what you've seen in LA. So thanks for sharing that. I think that piece is powerful too, and applicable for other VCs or emerging VCs out here who are looking for not only a unique lens or a unique way to approach the market, but tying that to something that is very personal or relevant or familiar to them as a way to sort of get in on the investing activity and also just stand out, right? Because to you all's point, there's so many opportunities right within our wheelhouse, within our neighborhoods, within our communities and our connections that have historically been overlooked. So it definitely is right for this current moment where there's opportunities to get access to funding as asset managers and to prove that out, with the investment theses that you all have created. So with that, want to talk with Nasir a bit about how you've approached the market and the things that you're interested in and that you understand, particularly as an impact investor. So you've spent some time before launching Zeal Capital, really working with education-based companies, even companies that are focused on future of work and health. And so with this more expansive lens, I want to know sort of how do you look at what's ahead in the market as an impact investor and sort of defining, what impact really means.
Yeah. It's a great question, Stephanie. First of all, I want to plus one to Samara and Austin. One of the unifying themes across all of our theses is generational wealth and what that does for our community, what that does for us personally and our families, right? And founders we back. And so it's quite frankly, Austin mentioned it's a missing opportunity. This is best for our economy overall. And so the more and more we overlook, the more and more seasoned active investors continue to avoid their own blind spots, the more and more investable Black and brown entrepreneurs, women-led entrepreneurs are going to continue to get not funded. And so I just wanted to highlight this theme, unifying theme around generational wealth and what that means in our work in the private markets. Today, 28% of our country continues to be not financially healthy, right? Just being able to take care of bills and just normal expenses. And then we still today, even especially with building on top of or coming out, as we come out of the global pandemic, just close to 40 million plus workers continue to be underemployed. There's a correlation between being financially healthy and ensuring you have the right skills to remain competitive in today and tomorrow's workforce. So that's that. And in an app, even before building out Zeal, I spent a year market mapping these two sectors, recognizing, Stephanie, to your point, I've spent really leaned into the education technology sector and employment technology sector, HR, people analytics, the broader just future of work from K-12 to adult learning, lifelong learning, and continue to see the supply demand being the number of gaps that continue to exist around the fact that to go to a university continues to be a luxury today. The cost of higher ed is not going down anytime soon, and so there's these alternative pathways to education that employers themselves are actually beginning to look at, whether it's coding camps or apprenticeship models or ISA programs, you name it. But they're beginning to expand their lens to look at candidates who have core competency who probably did not go to a 2 or 4 year school. You have new training and skill development programs that exist for workers because the cost of recruiting versus retaining employers is a huge difference in terms of cost for the employer. So technology platforms that are reskilling, upskilling, providing nano credentials, degrees for workers. And on the financial technology, financial wellness, Stephanie, you and I recently invested in a deal that's focusing on credit access expansion like Isuzu, and even companies that are rethinking or changing, particularly the underbanked consumers' behaviors around savings and that idea of how best to, what it means to build wealth creation with the income that we have coming into our pockets. And so, that's the demand side. On the supply side, there continues to be a great deal of innovation, particularly on the early stage, happening across the future of work and fintech sector. And so what we've done, we've partnered with 24 ESOs, entrepreneurs, organizations, and I was already, during my time at AT&T, had a formal relationship with, all of which were outside of your traditional tech hotbeds, but also coupled those relationships with ecosystem players in California, in New York, and in Boston. And so just being able to couple the correlation between wealth and skills and investing in solutions across the future of work and fintech as a means to narrow the wealth and skills gap, and then an intentional investment discipline that we've coined inclusive investing that allows us to an earlier point, allows us to widen our lens and really lean into our peers, whether it's Austin in LA or Mac in Baltimore or Samara in Chicago or Stephanie, you in our own backyard, being neighbors, and even Keisha being in Oakland, to co-invest in these sectors that's right for innovation today. And so just incredibly excited to focus, be a sector specific fund, but leaning into these two sectors where we continue to see a great deal of innovation and impact. And to your point around impact, by the way, it's, we have internal framework that we collect and capture for every company that we invest in, depending on the business model. And so every company will sign a diversity pledge, for example. We have a R&D with Brookings Institution that we leverage in terms of research and development. But so really taking this holistic approach as we think about from an impact investment perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll even add to that as we think about, again, what the gaps are in this market and why we all are here, what inspires us to be here, to tap into entrepreneurs that are overlooked. That is impact, right? Inherently, as we make and shift these markets. But also appreciate you, Nasir, of diving in deeper around, how you're measuring and tracking impact directly in the companies that you invest in. So thanks for that. So now I'll move it over to Mac with RareBreed, which needs no further introduction. But Mac, again, you're known for being very public and transparent about your journey as a VC. And, in my opinion, I think that's allowed you to be differentiated, right? And to stand out in the market. And so talk more about, what do you believe is your greatest asset as a sort of non-traditional investor? And then if you can, tie that into just some overall best practices or things you want to share with aspiring VCs as they think about, how they'll enter the market.
Yeah, so what makes me unique is probably my openness, right? Like, I am very transparent, probably to a fault at times, of just the way the process is, but it allows, and it's purposeful, because I want people to know, like, I'm not this special person to put on a pedestal, right? Like, everybody here on this panel, I know all of you as people, right? We're people first, right? I'm not a checkbook, right? And for the founders to see me as a person, when we get to have conversations and I get to know companies and I get to the due diligence, it's not this standoffish, oh, he's an investor, he's going to try and take my company, nothing like that. It's like, oh, Mac's really cool. We're having a great conversation. Hey, Mac, you want to learn about my company? Yeah, I'd love to learn about you. Like those interactions and making these, it's a very transactional business. And these interactions are very transactional. but to give them the feeling of not being transactional, right? Like you're having a conversation with somebody that you care about. And, the founders in my portfolio will tell you, they probably look at me as a friend before they look at me as a VC. And in some cases, some of them look at me as an employee and before they look at me as a VC. Like, yo, if I got a problem, I give it to Mac. Like, yo, I need something done, I give it to Mac. If anybody needs something tweeted, like if they need somebody to tweet something out, it all comes to me, right? Like, yo, Mac, we just had this article come out. You mind tweeting it? Yes, I send it. I tweet it, right? So like, I think that's been really helpful as somebody who's not like, for those who don't know my story, I was an engineer and I was a founder, but like, I don't have a college background. I don't have a college degree, right? I went to college for 2 years, but like, I don't have a degree. I don't have a finance background, right? I learned a bunch of this stuff on the job, right? And so I didn't have a network. Like when I started my first company, I didn't know what networking was, right? When I went to go raise my fund, I didn't have a network of LPs, just like Samara mentioned. Like I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. And so I've been able to use this public branding that I've created over time to help generate that. And that's been really critical because for anybody who's an aspiring VC or somebody who's in venture and wants to stay in this career for a long time or eventually raise your own fund, this is very much a network-driven business, right? It is like you want to build those networks. You need to build networks of founders because having differentiated deal flow is what this industry is built off of. You want to have networks of other VCs because you want to be able to share deal flow. You want to co-invest, right? You need to be in those pools. And then you want to have a network of operators who are people who work at companies or run companies that could potentially be partners or customers for companies you invest in, right? Like if you can build up networks in those three pools, you have a shot doing it. And, being able to coin yourself in a thought leader, whether it's in a specific industry or whether it's just a thought leader about venture in general, like that's for me. I just talk about venture in general. It will allow people to start to get a view, start to understand your viewpoints on the world. And as they do, they'll want to inherently get to know you and learn more. And as you build those networks, that feeds into what we do. And so, that's been what's worked for me. And I will say this, at RareBreed, our fund is a 506c led fund. So that means designated under a 506c designation, which means I can publicly solicit. I can talk about my fund out in the open. I can tweet about it, but it's not a solve all. Like just because I go to Twitter and say I have a fund doesn't mean anybody's going to send me money, right? Like there's still got to be substance behind it. And when you start talking about the bigger checks, when we talking about the stuff that, some of the, I'm raising 10 million, I could do that off of Twitter. When we start talking about 50 million, stuff like that, I start having heart palpitations because I don't know what that feels like. But, some of the folks on this call do. And once you get there, like tweeting about your fund helps, gets you some branding, some social awareness. But closing deals from those larger institutions, like just because you talk about publicly, it ain't going to save you, right? It's all going to be at the end of the day, it's going to come down to you showing you can do the work and having that track record or showing that you're building in the direction of that track record, right?
That's awesome. So what I got from that is authenticity, showing up as your true self and leveraging that to build networks. And then, depending on the type of fund you put together, right, will sort of dictate your fundraising strategy and the type of LPs that you will connect with or will be a good fit for you. So to that point, and by the way, panel, this is a conversation, so feel free to cut me off, jump in.
I'll jump in.
Good. Okay,
I'm all about giving people props, and I look at what Mac does, like on Twitter, and I admire it so much. Like just that he plays the role of making this accessible to all the same people that we're talking to, and and I think that we need people like that. We need people to say, to Mac's point, like, don't look at me as like somebody who's up on a pedestal and I gotta go and like, present in this way. It's like, what we all need founders more than founders need us. You can build a business without VCs. VCs cannot build a firm without founders, right? Like, and right. The way I usually describe it is like, is my role is something like a coach or a cheerleader. You're the star player. You're LeBron. You're, you know, whoever it may be. And so there has to be a relationship, a give and take, and sort of a mutual respect. And I think that on some level, you know, folks like Mac that can demystify this and bring the attention and say like, oh, this is for me. I mean, and all of us, I think, are trying to position ourselves as letting people know that like, you're going to have to be good. Matter of fact, you're going to have to be the best of everybody around you. But with that being said, like, don't check yourself out of contention. You feel like that's something that's happening in this city over there for these types of people. Like, the whole reason that all 5 of our farms on this exist is to create pathways and to create access.
That's right. Now I want to get back to the LP conversation, because I think that's really important, and not to, not to put anybody on the spot, but I do think it's important for aspiring VCs to understand sort of what they're getting into and how to think about approaching individuals, institutions, particularly for capital. So, Samara, I'm going to call on you, but you know, you can choose whether or not you want to answer this question. But I really am curious, sort of, you know, as a Latina, as a woman VC, or just as a first time, you know, fund manager in the early days, sort of what were some of the key learnings around how to approach potential LPs and sort of how to think about the type of LPs you want essentially in your fund? I mean, because all money is not good money, right? So would love if you could share some stories around that.
Yeah, so I had come from venture. So I was at a venture fund before this. So I had a track record within a venture fund. I wasn't new to venture investing, but I was new to my investment thesis. And many times institutions, that's not enough, right? I could have 5 years of investing experience in venture, but you're new to your thesis. And at the time also, there weren't some of these other fund structures are fantastic now for getting your first fund going, you know, getting it from maybe non-traditional investors, getting smaller check sizes. So I would have probably gone that route if that was available at the time, but it wasn't. And so what I wanted to do, I was like, well, I'm going to create an angel group. I have enough deal flow. I have enough individuals that want to invest in this. I'm going to go and create it. And I ended up in this process talking to the chief innovation officer for the state of Illinois, the treasurer's office. And he was thinking about a new way of investing in first-time fund managers. And so I pitched him this idea. I'm like, I've always wanted to do a venture fund. And he's like, well, let me take a look. And so it took a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but it was the first of its kind in the state of Illinois. And that opened up the doors for a lot of other fund managers. It wasn't just me, it was somebody else here who's a white man in the middle part of Illinois and has a thesis around the middle part of Illinois, right? And so, and we couldn't be more similar. Matter of fact, he's the nicest guy, but we had a thesis around non-traditional kind of geographies and founders. But my first fund was 100% institutional. My second fund is so far like 80-90% institutional. I don't have a lot of rich friends and family. I just and I wish I had max followers on Twitter. I just don't. We all wish we did, and his amazing tweets. So I had to go the institutional route, and during COVID. So that's another kind of layer of complexity during fundraising. What happened was I did have an established, built relationship with a set group of institutional LPs prior to COVID, which helped. And then PayPal Ventures, which I think most of us, or a lot of us got funded here, they kicked it off in last summer and they committed before anybody else. And I'm gonna give hats off to PayPal, because they didn't care who else was in. They didn't care if you had started. They were like, we like you, we're going to invest. And that basically helped kick off the raise and get other people in. And if you're a founder and you've raised money, you know that it's a lot about creating momentum and FOMO and the whole thing. And so the more you can get of that, the more others will be, will want to come in. So So for me, some of the biggest learnings were I thought that institutions didn't want to talk to me, and I thought that I couldn't because I was a first-time fund manager. But sometimes you only need one person to believe in you. You can get 1,000 no's, but that one person that can be your first check, that can help catalyze the round. And that's what I try to do for founders as well. I try to be that one person where like everyone else is saying no, and I'm just like, all right, you gotta have more conviction than anybody else, but be the first check in before anybody else says yes. And so some of the biggest learnings were, one, the relationship building, two, the institutional route, which is very different, and then three, that we experience, I know people give a lot of VC, like they talk bad about VCs on Twitter, and VCs are like mean and they ghost you and whatever else. But we have to raise too, and we get that from LPs as well. and so there's a different level of empathy that happens when you're kind of a sandwich, and like you have to raise, and then you're also investing in founders that have to raise as well. So I don't know if I guess fully answered the question, but for me, a big learning was doing this without a rich friends and family around me, and positioning myself in a unique way where institutions were excited to partner with me.
Love that.
I love to double click and underscore Samara's point around that first check. Before you go into market, like you have the utmost conviction on your strategy. You've looked at other venture firms who may be operating in different sectors or geos or stage, but your unique vision, the way you think about sourcing, investing, and helping scale high growth early stage entrepreneurs, you believe is unique. And then you get shot down by all of these LPs until that one LP, in this case, like a lot of us, being PayPal. And by the way, if we didn't learn anything over the past year, probably before, we all said that corporations, their money doesn't move fast enough, or they can't. Like, we learned that money can move fast across corporations, right? And so there's that myth is gone, right? And so
3 months went to three weeks, or even 3 days.
That was the most seamless, that diligence process. I'm sure that was, you guys all experienced the same with PayPal and Mario and team. And shout out to Mario, who is going on and do great things. But I just that was just an amazing process, and also just this perk. I'm sure everyone else just like, all right, this fund is valuable. We can do this. We can raise 50 million. The other thing I thought about going into market was, and I'm sure a lot of us felt this as well, is like before pitching, you're like, all right, these are the LPs who I've built relationships with over time, whether it's, private foundations, being in the impact space, Stephanie, individuals, even to the extent, maybe a few fund of funds that are focused on diverse fund managers. And for me, I felt like those are easy LPs. I given the track record, given the reputation, given domain expertise, given the model, that should be an easy LP that they will underwrite me in. And I was surprised. Like, I would say, if I was to do a pie chart as well, Samara, 85% of LPs, I would have thought would have been a far fetch in becoming investment partners in the deal. 90%, to Samara's point, 90% of investors also I've never met before in person, right? So that's a powerful signal in terms of the viability of our funds in this market. And so that was a huge surprise. I think one of the biggest lessons learned that I had to keep revising, and now is I can share this cold to every LP, both current and prospective, is just how we think about portfolio construction and pacing. So for those who have an interest in venture, it's important to articulate clearly to your LP how the heck you're going to deploy that capital, at what pace, what's your target ownership, what's your how much capital you planning to reserve, what's your post-investment value creation outside of capital introductions, what else are you going to offer entrepreneurs as your value proposition, to not just source deals, but win deals at the same as well. And so making sure that answer was incredibly clear and concise was an area in my presentation that got sharper and sharper and sharper as we started landing new LPs. But I'll pause there. I want to be cognizant of time and offer everyone else space to share their lessons learned as well.
I want to jump in here, right? Because I agree with everybody. Over the last year, we've seen corporates move in a way we never had before. And we've seen diverse fund managers starting their initial funds at a pace that we've never seen before. But I gotta be honest, when I look at my fund and I look at my LP makeup, and my larger checks have come from institutions. I appreciate every single one of those institutions that put money in my fund, but I still feel some type of way that every institution that put money in my fund put it in out of a diversity initiative. And it really makes me stop and think, like, if George Floyd doesn't happen,
what happens?
Do we get funded? Like, regardless of whether George Floyd happens or not, does not change the skills that everybody on this panel has. It does not change the entrepreneurs that we find, the entrepreneurs we back, the value that we created with the money we invested. But the only reason we were given that money to invest was because of George Floyd and then folks creating diversity initiatives. And that bothers me. And I'm not saying that what these corporates did was wrong. I'm happy they did it because, like, I might not be here without that, right? Like let's be clear. I don't know if I get pushed to raise my fund or feel like I could if it's not for that. But long term, diversity initiatives are like short-lived. They're not long-term things. And it reminds me that, yes, everybody on this panel got funding, right? But these initiatives are really tests. It's a test to see, like, hey, if we give these Black and brown folks some money, are we going to make more? Can we make this work? And so it reminds me that all of us here are part of a class that people are going to look back to and say, did it work? Mm-hmm. They obviously didn't think enough of us to give us money out of their regular funds. They had to make a carve out where it's like, it's not even from the funds. We took a bunch of the GPs, took some money and took it to the side, separate of the fund, so separate out of our LPs, because their institutional LPs don't care about that. And can we prove this? Right? And
exactly.
So
This is going to be like the 96 NBA draft, like the greatest, our vintage music. It's like, you got those in the 96 draft. You had Kobe, you had, God rest his soul, you had AI, Kerry Kittles, and people are going to, particularly LPs, and then just the broader entrepreneurial sort of investor community, are going to have their eyes on this class and all of our peers, right, Austin?
I mean, it is that. It is this class this year. Everybody who raised the fund over the last 12 months are, whether we wanted to or not, going to define whether it's a good idea to back fund managers that are going after underrepresented founders or finding like diversity initiatives or things like that. And that is a lot of pressure on us, but as one of my mentors always says, pressure is a privilege. Like, man, like, you gave me the ball, I'm running with it. This is what I've been saying before you guys woke up to the idea that it's a good idea to give our fund money or to invest with us. I believe it just as much 2 years ago as I did the day before George Floyd died, as I did the day after George Floyd died, as I do today. And like, and so we're running with it, and we got to show and prove. And I feel privileged in many ways to have the opportunity, obviously born out of very, very unfortunate circumstance that it took to get us here. So I understand you, Mac, feel some type of way about it. But at the same time, like, now that we have our shot, like this is what I've been asking for, more or less. And so now it's all about saying like, now that you gave us a shot, yeah, we can be the 96 draft. And I'm wearing 24, man.
That's right. And to your point, Austin, like, when has there ever been a time where we didn't have to show and prove, right? You know, there's a resiliency in us, right? There's a go-getter mentality, a hustle in us. So come with it, right? Like, we just need access. We need a way in, and then the rest is up to us.
Yeah, if I could just chime in here, I mean, I think we're all super passionate about this, and that was one of the things that I know you were going to talk about, what some of the things that we want to see improve or trends. I'm already starting to see that die down a little bit, right? So like going to institutions and going to pitch them, they're like, well, we already allocated to our, our 4 or 5, and we're going to wait to see how they do, and we'll come back like in a year or 2. And I'm like, are you only doing 4 or 5, right? Why is that? Because it only comes out of a smaller bucket. Also, I've had people that have a larger bucket, but they're like, we're considering you for our impact or our, side bucket, which is a lot smaller. It's like, thank you for the $250,000 check, but why not the $3 million check? And so for us, what I'd like to see is not these separate buckets or these separate funds that only invest in women and minorities. There's that, but why can't traditional funds also invest in women and minorities? I get a ton of, traditional funds. A woman entrepreneur, she's great. I'm like, well, what do you think about the business? Or this is a Black-owned business. Like, well, what do you think? Why are you giving it to me? Right? Let's do it. Let's co-invest. Let's do this together. So there's so many separate things happening right now. And what I'd love to see is the combine of, let's work together. We're naturally going to bring in diverse deal flow. We're naturally going to bring in and invest in these founders, but we don't need separate buckets. And from the LP side, what worries me the most is that there was a lot of momentum and now it's dying down, and there is a lot of pressure. And to Austin's point, there's a lot of privilege, which we're very fortunate to be in that position. And I every single day I'm like, I need to produce, I need to perform, and there's this high bar, much higher than I think maybe some others will put themselves in. But you need to prove, otherwise, it's like everyone else that's trying to raise, right? You're kind of like setting the example, and that's a hard place to be in. But anyways, to end on a good note, I am fortunate that, given an very unfortunate situation, which is it sparked a lot of conversations that needed to happen in our industry for many, many years. We would not all have been here, if those conversations had not started and launched a lot of these initiatives. And now it's on us to really keep pushing that forward, pushing the conversation forward, and challenging, LPs, founders, traditional VCs, continuing that as opposed to stopping the conversations already.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, I want to get in one more question and then try to open it up a little bit for questions from the audience. And I saw a founder had a question about how to navigate fundraising. But just to put it back to you all, like, what do you believe is best for the culture, right, in terms of how we operate in venture capital and what, venture capital needs to do or how it needs to change to support the things that we all care about? We talked about co-investing. We talked about collaboration with more traditional VCs. We talk about comparisons of ourselves to other fund managers, by these LPs who may have a very different thesis or outlook, but because of skin color or gender, we're automatically lumped into this one bucket, right? So if you guys could share like what you think needs to be activated and how you think VC can be done better for our communities and for the culture, I'd love to hear that.
I'll kick it off and I'll be short here. To whom much is given, much is required. And we're seeing organizations, Black Institute, HBCU VC, Black VC, you're beginning to see a great deal of structured organizations that are educating venture capitalist investors. And so we have to mentorship has played a major role in my career, and that's something that I am going to continue to do, especially, so we all have a responsibility to mentor the next generation of investors. So, and that will yield a more even more deeper pipeline of investors across the private markets. And so that's what I'm most excited about. And a lot of us, and even a lot of our peers, are intentional how we think about interns and analysts as we build our respective franchises. So I'm most excited about training the next generation of aspiring investors as low as high school.
And I'll jump in here and say, when we think about the culture and our communities and venture as a whole, I want people to remember venture is not the end all be all. We're one portion of the community. We're one portion of the solution. We still need organizations and funding mechanisms for our small businesses, right? We still need options for revenue-based investing. And entrepreneurship is not the only path to create wealth, right? Because if you were one of the first, let's call it 150 employees in Uber, you're a millionaire today. But in order to be one of the first 150 employees at Uber, you got to be in those networks. And so what I'm encouraged by is that we're seeing different platforms come through for different portions of the capital stack. But then also all the folks here on this panel are investing in the next Ubers, right? And are being intentional with those companies hiring from the communities we care about. Quite candidly, I'm an investor in a company called Main Street. It's a fast-growing tech company, the standard Silicon Valley story, right? Founder, multi-time founder, had multiple exits on a rocket ship. Within their first 50 employees, they have 4 Black hires. 3 of those 4 hires came from my network. Why? Because I'm now in the network to give those individuals access. And I'm encouraged that we're going to see more of that because of the folks we see here. And so I don't want everybody to leave this panel thinking VC is the end all be all. This is the way that we make our impact. This is how we support the community. But understand that the community as a whole needs more than just us, right? And there's a bunch of different ways to make money. That's one thing I know all of us can speak to, is like, there's a million ways to make money, right? But a lot of it hinges on you having the access to Nasir's point, the education, getting the exposure. And so I'm encouraged that with this being, the best draft of all time, we're going to be able to give a lot of people that exposure and grow the entire ecosystem, from LPs to VCs to other financial institutions within the capital stack, to even hiring practices.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Impact America, Stephanie, and like folks that the few people that were doing damage in this industry and saying all these things before it was in vogue, before it was easy to do, for that matter. Derek and Urban Tech Connect, like I was working with Derek, who I remember a slide that Derek put up around where dollars were being allocated. He would present this slide all this time about for plug-in South LA. It showed a map of LA and it showed where the dollars were allocated and where startups are based. And South LA had this very, very blank slate. And one of the things that, because of folks like Derek, if you showed that same thing today, you would start seeing a whole lot more seeds planted because of people publicly talking about this and bringing this to folks' attention and like changing the narrative. Over the last year, obviously lots of momentum, lots of things happened, but take the time to acknowledge the people that did it early.
Awesome. So, with that, I think looking at the time, for those who had questions that were very specific, I know there were a couple of founders who had, very specific issue, wanted to get it addressed. What I'll say is, hit us up, honestly. You look us up online. You can go to our websites and find us. I know for Impact America Fund, we have like open access. You can share pitch materials, et cetera, or even just send us an email and we'll get back to you. But for everyone else who's talking about in general, sort of navigating fundraising, there's a lot of great resources out here as well that you can, educate yourself on in terms of how to think about pursuing venture capital. To Mac's point, if that is the thing that you want to do, I think for a lot of founders, they first need to take a pause and really understand what they're getting into, as well as if it makes sense for your particular company. And so we can leave some resources there in the chat for you guys. And then in general, I just want to, thank the panelists for coming out. Derek, if you can hear us, we might need a round 2 of this to go deeper on a couple of things we touched on. This was a fantastic conversation. And if I'll leave you guys with any last words before we sort of wrap things up. If you want to promote anything, if you want to, leave sort of, what your email address is or your website, you can do that. Or if you just want to give, one quick piece of advice for a founder or a VC.
The easiest way to find me is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MacConwell, MacConwell. If you got a question, tweet it at me. Shoot me a DM. I'm fairly accessible. Look forward to connecting with folks.
One of my favorite African proverbs that I'm sure all of us know is African proverb. I think it's timely and resonates to all of us, is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm just encouraged by all of us, especially beginning with the personal relationships, Matt, to your point around us being people first, and then coincidentally we're in the same space to catalyze change around entrepreneurship. I'm encouraged by that. So thank you as well, Stephanie, for your leadership. And I shared my email address and social handle as well. My little cousin's trying to get me to be even more active on the social. So get your followers up, cuz. So I'm trying to be more proactive there, Mac.
I'll just say in closing, just really want to encourage everybody to go hard and again work together. Like, I think that so many people want to again, to Nasir's point, go at it alone or build quietly and then say, once things are perfect, then I'm going to release it to the world. I think that you've got to know that there are other people, other resources out here to help you, and you go so much further when we're all collaborating. And you could reach our firm, meet us at slauson.co.
Yeah, and I'll just round it out. You can reach me at Samar Mejia, Samar on Twitter. Go to my website if you have a business you want to let us know about. We take all intros, both warm and cold, through there. And my piece of advice would just be one, it only takes one person to really lead you around, catalyze it, and help you get going many times. And then 2 is don't be afraid to chart your own path if where you're at is just not working for you.
Beautiful. And again, I'm Steph Thomas from Impact America Fund. You can reach us at www.impactamerica.vc, or you can reach me at stephanie@impactamerica.vc. And thanks again to the panel. Thanks again to Pledge LA, Derek and team. This was a great conversation. We'd love to do it again. And everyone else, hit us up again on email, on our websites, or on the Twitters. Take care. Have a good one.